Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brew fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast with Craig and Vince here with you today. Vince, how are you doing?
Doing great, Craig. How are things with you? We've got Scotty or Chad on as well?
Nope. But we do have some breaking / shocking news coming in the face of the signing a couple weeks ago of Rhys Hoskins, which kind of we thought as Brewer fans, all of our listeners, and of course us, thought that it signaled to the base that the Brewers are going to be making a push for the division title once again this year and not selling off their big free agents to be. But alas, that was incorrect because the Brewers have traded the best starting pitcher in the franchise's history in 2001 and Cy Young Award winner Corbin Burnes to the Baltimore Orioles in exchange for left-handed pitcher DL Hall, shortstop / second base man Joey Ortiz, both 25 years old, and a comp pick in the 2024 draft, which would be the 34th overall pick from the Orioles. First of all, what was your reaction when you heard it, and thoughts on the return?
Well, I should have known it was coming. You know, we had been talking about Corbin Burnes being a potential trade candidate for the last 2 years, probably ever since, Burnes won a Cy Young Award, and certainly ever since last spring when the Brewers and Burnes got into a very public dispute following his arbitration hearing. There was clearly some bad blood between Burnes and the front office. That being said, to your point, Craig, I was a bit shocked because the Hoskins signing had just taken place. I mean, we hadn't even had a week of excitement yet building up to the 2024 season. And, after signing Rhys Hoskins and bolstering our offense until we traded our ace, it's like, we're taking away from the strength of the team and finally fixing our offense. But now our starting pitching is in shambles for 2024. On one hand, I'm not surprised again, because we've been talking about it for so long, but on another hand, it kind of came out of the blue. But this front office has proven time and time again, so many times to us as Brewer fans, that they're going to kind of do the unexpected thing that I guess that nothing really surprises me at this point, but it did come as a bit of a shock, if that makes sense, last night.
Yeah. I found out about it via your text, actually. Thank you for that, Vince.
I didn't mean to be the bearer of bad news, Craig. I apologize. Yeah, I got the note from Scotty's interns and had to pass it along right away to our group thread.
Yeah, so it was a little bit shocking. Again, we all knew that there was a possibility coming in this offseason, but I'll start by saying what on earth has been the Brewers' plan this offseason, because it has never, from day one, it's never been clear whatsoever. Let's see. We started off the offseason by somehow losing our franchise icon manager, Craig Counsell, to our division rival, the Chicago Cubs. And from there, we just did other head-scratching moves, like basically gave away Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor to our old GM in the New York Mets. Then we made a series of other strange moves, like just collecting strange pieces for bullpen pieces, like the Arizona from the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers, like guys that they just don't even want, and Clark and the guy we got from the Dodgers. Then there's basically crickets for quite a while. And again, you're thinking, well, we're laying in the weeds waiting for the bargain bin to open up. And because of this is a strange and very slow free agent market offseason, you're like, well, is this even going to happen before the start of spring training? Because it's not looking that way. A lot of other teams around the league were kind of gun shy to like really open up the wallet, so to speak, this year, probably because a lot of the things going on with the television contracts right now. And the uncertainty of rolling around that. But that's more of just an excuse. The bottom line is eventually the Brewers did shockingly make that move just over a week ago and sign Rhys Hoskins to a 2-year deal with a 1-year opt-out, which basically signaled to us Brewer fans that, hey, they know he's going to opt out if he's healthy and productive, and they're expecting him to be a middle order hitter for this year. So we must be going all in once again. So it's great. Burns is staying put at least the All-Star break. Same thing for Adames. And that's what, you're all fired up, excited for the season. And then, alas, this happened yesterday. And from my understanding, it was actually the groundwork for the trade and all the pieces involved were already hashed out all the way back in December. And that since that time, Arnold has been gauging the market, just, looking for a better deal, possibly all this time. And I guess as we're approaching spring training, he circled back and took him up on the offer. So, I don't know. So overall, I mean, outside of the shock of Burns actually being gone and the 2024 season pretty much being torpedoed for the Milwaukee Brewers, what were your thoughts on the return?
I don't hate the return, but I don't think it was nearly enough for a guy of Corbin Burns' caliber. I've seen a lot of, Monday morning quarterbacks this morning on social media. Our intern has kind of highlighted some tweets this morning from some Brewer fans who are kind of disparaging Corbin Burns and his pitching style and saying he's on a downward, trajectory. And I just would caution that fans who are kind of thinking that Corbin Burns is no longer a top class pitcher in the National League should really look through Brewers history and kind of see where he would rank amongst all-time Brewers great pitchers, and certainly ones that we've developed. So, I think I was not upset necessarily by the guys that we got back, except very underwhelmed by the amount of guys that we got back, just the lack of quality. I felt like we should have gotten a lot more. And, I know that there's some upside for both of these guys. I know that DL Hall could be a decent left-handed starter or reliever, I guess, for us. Joey Ortiz, I'm a little worried. We already have a guy who's very similar to that in Bryce Terang. I don't think that we can have two light-hitting infielders up the middle. So I don't know if Joey Ortiz is going to end up playing third base and this kind of unseats Tyler Black. I don't know if this is going to be an answer at shortstop if we are trading Willy Adames. I mean, there's a lot that remains to be determined about the Brewers and their offseason plan, if there is indeed a plan at all. Part of me thinks that this kind of fits into a pattern. You outlined a few things, and outside of Hoskins, it seems like every move that the Brewers have made has been all about cost savings. Certainly, that's the only part of the Taylor-Hauser trade that makes any sense whatsoever, to trade both of those guys. I know that we've got a lot of outfielders, but that being said, trading Hauser at this point looks really bad. If you were already talking, to Baltimore about Corbin Burns, trading Adrian Hauser back in December then makes no sense because our rotation depth is severely lacking. And Adrian Hauser at this point would probably be our third starter, given the guys that we currently have in our rotation. So to trade that for virtually nothing outside of cost savings, it's kind of unbelievable. I guess the cost savings you could say were used to sign Hopkins, but I don't know that that's really fixing a problem as much as moving problems around, because now you do have a better offense, but your pitching staff is incredibly weak. I think at the end of the day, my opinion has kind of remained consistently the same for 2-3 years. I think that we need ownership that spends more money. I mean, it's that easy to me. I think if you don't trade Burns necessarily this year, even though he was going to be a free agent, and he did certainly want to test the waters in free agency after this season. First of all, if you had an owner that was willing to open up his pocketbook a little bit more, maybe Corbin resigns here, or maybe Corbin doesn't get mad at the organization during the arbitration process in the first place and is more open to signing an extension. Second, you certainly don't have to trade him, which apparently the Brewers did going into this season. I mean, our team payroll is now about $105 million, which is, $25 million less than what it was last season. I mean, we're trending downwards, and, to me, this window is unfortunately, the previous window is closed now with Burns going and Woodruff being gone. We still have a window with the younger guys, but really there's just a lot more variables in place. But it's a new group now, I guess is how I'm looking at it. Outside of Christian Yelich, there's not much consistency. And last point, before I'll turn it back over to you, Craig, our interns did bring up the fact on social media last night that now with the trades of Adrian Hauser and Corbin Burns this offseason, Wade Miley, who even left for 3 seasons, Freddie Peralta and Christian Yelich are the only three guys that still remain from our 2018 playoff team.
Wow. Yeah, no, this feels like a closing of a chapter, and obviously getting bounced in last year's playoffs felt like that already to me. So it's not quite as, but this is really the finality of that. I mean, this is really the end of an era where the Brewers, for the last 7 or so years, have had arguably one of the, if not the best, one of the top 3 starting rotations in all of baseball. And that's something that was very foreign to this franchise over its 50+ year history, because as we all know, as Brewer fans since basically birth, that there's many decades where the Brewers did not have anything even resembling one ace, let alone 3 or 4 of them. So that's really sad to me. However, I guess the main comment I want to make is I just don't understand why this needed to be done now, because I feel that if they would have held on to Burns until the trade deadline, they would have, and then decided, okay, even if they're fringe contenders or not leading the division, then they said, okay, we're going to trade them. I feel like they could have got a better package from a contender at that point of the year than they just got right now. So that to me is just perplexing, and it leads me to believe the fact that not only do they want to do this, they want to do it for one of 2 reasons, or a combination of. A, they were scared that the same thing that could happen to Burns, that happened to Woodruff, and that, I mean, he gets injured during the year and then we get no compensation for him, which would be horrific for this small market franchise. Or more likely, in my opinion, that they literally wanted to save the $15 million that he was getting this year in his last year of arbitration, and not, in my opinion, to reallocate that money to other areas of the team, of the 2024 team. And that pisses me and any Brewer, that should piss any Brewer fan off, and it certainly does me.
Well, yeah, me too. They did give it to Rhys Hoskins, though, probably already in their mind. So it's $17 million for Hoskins this year. I bet you that they trade Hoskins probably at the deadline, for not in contention. So that's about a little less than $15 million. And so that's a little bit of a profit, actually, just on the Burns Hoskins deal if you trade Hoskins at the deadline. So yeah, that's about right. So basically, they're not willing to add to payroll. They're willing to subtract overall from payroll, to save money, because that's what they've proven themselves, wanting to do. It's every move this offseason. Again, Hoskins is an aberration, and Hoskins making his $17 million this year doesn't make up for the fact that, we're still spending less overall on payroll. So, I mean, yeah, this is just cost savings, and even the deal that we gave Hoskins is still a very team-friendly deal in many ways, with opt-out clauses on both sides, and the Brewers, I think, very strong likelihood of trading him if we're not in contention come July.
Yeah, so it doesn't feel as devastating as the Hader trade initially, just because we're not currently in first place, even though it's currently the off season. But we're at the point of the off season where, wishful thinkers are going to be like, well, we'll just take that, and now we can do some more stuff and retool the roster real quick, add to it, whatever, maybe make some more trades, whatever, and then retool for 2024. No, it's just too late for that. This is the end of a chapter, the end of an era, and you're just going, 10 days before pitchers and catchers report. This is what you're giving to the fan base. Like, okay, that's whatever.
And who is even out there that the Brewers would want to acquire at this point? I mean, and again, this has been the same refrain over and over and over again for the last 3, 4, 5 off seasons, that the Brewers are going to go out and get somebody. And I think one year our big off season acquisition was Jackie Bradley Jr. I mean, it's been like this for years now at this point. And it's the same memo from the front office. It's like we can never pass or exceed a certain amount of payroll, and it's frustrating. I don't blame just the market. I think that it really comes down to Mark Adonasio not being willing to spend more money on this team. Like, he's allocated a certain amount. That's that. And I think that what's very difficult is that when you fix one problem, in this case, our offense was woeful, particularly at the corners, and you fix that by signing Rhys Hoskins, then in order to do that, because the owner is cheap, then you have to go cause another problem, because now our starting rotation is a big, big problem. Like, yes, we've got a ton of young talent coming up in the system, including guys that we just got back in this trade, which is super exciting. I mean, we all love watching young players. This show was founded on kind of following that first group of post 2000 draftees for the Brewers. And that's exciting, but that doesn't help you in 2024 necessarily. As guys like Jacob Mizorowski work their way through the system, and guys like, Aaron Ashby come back from injury, all exciting potential arms in a future Brewers rotation. Unfortunately, I don't know that rotation is going to be in 2024.
Well, yeah, and like you said, that there's a lot of promise and talent in our organization when it comes to arms. Not very many of them are major league ready, and even for the ones that are, there's for your first couple years in the league, Robert Gasser and D.L. Hall, one of our attorneys in this trade, are going to go through major growing pains for the first couple years of their career. It's very, very rare for a pitcher to be so good that they enter the major leagues and immediately find success in their first or second year in the league. Usually pitchers, take till they're closer to 30 to really level out and become the ace pitcher, become the best pitcher that they can be. And so, so again, contending teams usually don't like to go through all those growing pains, because that adds up into losses and key losses over the course of the season. And it's almost a necessity in order to get your pitcher to the level they need to be, so that they're giving you their full value, so to speak. And as good as these guys could be, there's always injuries, there's always busts. And none of these things are sure things. And we were sitting here with a rotation of sure thing aces at the top of their game. And I just felt like we didn't push all our chips to the middle of the table at any point and go for it. And I think that's a detriment to fans. It goes back to the Antanasio philosophy, along with Arnold, to try to keep the Brewers as competitive every year as possible and not go through a full rebuild. And I think that's a mistake. But I guess that's what.
Yeah, I agree with you, Craig. I totally agree with you. And we have let's see, a couple points to what you just said. First of all, it not only did we quote unquote not go for it, we actually subtracted, and that again gets back to the Josh Hader trade, where you're literally taking away from a first place team at the deadline. And that is the one that was unbelievable to me. I understand, even if I don't agree with, I can kind of understand why the Brewers trade Corbin Burnes, even though again, I would have hoped for a bigger return. I would have done it. I may have done it at a different point in the offseason. I may have waited till the deadline. There's a lot of variables with that. At least with that, we weren't sitting in first place when the trade happened. So that to me is like, it's the opposite of just go for it mentality when it comes to the Josh Hader trade. That's the give up no matter what, because, we'll still get our small little bite at the apple, quote unquote, that year. But we're never going to actually go all in or put all of our chips into the middle of the table. And to your other point too, about prospects and pitching prospects and arms, I remember you and I being incredibly excited in the summer of 2022 when Ethan Small got called up and he was going to make his debut. I believe it was in Chicago at Wrigley Field against the Cubs. And I remember stopping what I was doing to go watch him pitch that day. And since that point, it's now, February of 2024. It's not like it was that long ago. It was like a year and a half ago. Since that point, not only has Ethan Small no longer pitched only a handful of games in the big leagues, he got lit up in the minor leagues. He got moved to the bullpen. He got one more chance in the bullpen in Milwaukee and got lit up, literally in like one game. And then just last night, the other news for this podcast is he got designated for assignment. So his fate is yet to be determined. But, the Brewers had, quote unquote, one of the best pitching prospects in all baseball 2 years ago, number one in our system. And he's no longer, not only is he no longer being relied upon, but he's likely to be out of the organization in 4 days. So that's just
and that's baseball, and that's baseball prospects for you. And that just goes to show that the majority of baseball prospects on any top 10, top 100, top whatever list, 80 to 90% of them never even sniff the major leagues. I mean, so you're talking about a lot of talented guys coming out of college, high school, spending many years with success in the minor leagues, and they get to the big leagues, and it's just a huge step up. They just can't make it. And plenty of guys just have very short, if no careers, and never even make it to the big. So that step is huge, a huge accomplishment for the guys that make it, and even bigger for the ones that succeed. And again, these guys cannot be counted on. They could show all they want at just different levels in the major leagues. There's so many minor leagues. There's so many variables in the minor leagues with different leagues, different stadiums. And in the past couple of years, Major League Baseball has been experimenting with balls, with bases, and all this stuff. It's been throwing off some of the development. You've got the pandemic messing with guys' development in the last couple of years. And so there's all these variables that there's just, you don't want to go with such uncertainty when you don't have to. I get, as a small market team, you want to make those moves, but this just, the time of this just, and the return just seemed off to me, and it's disappointing. But with that being said, for the rest of our podcast, we'll delve into the return here pretty quick, and then kind of answer where do the Brewers go from here before we wrap it up for you listeners. So thanks for tuning in. I guess if you don't mind, Vince, I'll start with going more detailed with our return. Let's start actually with the competitive balance pick. It's the number 34 overall pick in the 2024 draft. Again, most draft picks can't be traded besides the competitive A and competitive B round picks that are given to mostly small market teams because of revenue balancing out and whatnot. And those picks can be traded. But this is a very valuable pick because it comes just after the end of the first round. And, as we all know, first rounders, can be really up, star level players at some point. However, tons of them do flame out. And I just don't know how much the Brewers value this pick, because if you just remember, just a few short years ago, the Brewers had a first round competitive pick, competitive A balance pick, and they traded away for Alex Claudio. So you see how much they value it. With that being said, I think it's a valuable pick. But go ahead, Vince.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I have been looking at last night was saying that the Brewers would have gotten a qualifying offer pick roughly in the same ballpark of selections if Burns would have indeed left us as a free agent if we had provided him with a qualifying offer. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. So basically that's a wash because
as long as, because if we would have kept sorry, go ahead.
And the other thing that's changing the rules, if we were to trade him to the Orioles or another organization at the deadline, they would not be able to offer him the qualifying offer. So they would not be able to recompensate that pick. Now the Orioles, who I think are, 50-50, are probably more unlikely than 50-50 to not be able to sign him to long-term deal before he hits free agency. So really it's a 1-year rental for them too. But they do have the ability to basically get that pick back because they're going to offer him a qualifying offer, and him and his agent Boris are not going to accept that. They're obviously, outside of being hurt or something, they're going to, which then they wouldn't even offer to him. But they're going to decline that, and then the Orioles will get that comp pick back. So that is a wash. They easily threw that in, and not only that, but next year's draft class is deeper and stronger than this year's. So in my opinion, it's actually a worse deal for the Brewers to take this one rather than just the pick. So what this deal was done for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And on the Orioles too, they do have a new ownership group that should likely be approved by Major League Baseball. So not that the show is Orioles focused, but I am kind of interested to see if the new ownership group, I'm assuming that they're going to get approved soon, but led by David Rubenstein and including guys like Cal Ripken and Grant Hill. I'm kind of interested to see which direction they go, if they're willing to spend a little bit more money. I have a feeling that they will. But anyway, sorry, Craig, go ahead.
Before I dive into the two players that the Brewers actually got, I will say that for everyone throughout baseball, Oriole fans and anyone who's a baseball fan knows that this was a slam dunk A+ deal for the Baltimore Orioles. There's no other way you can slice it. They just were a surprise contending team, a little bit ahead of the rebuild last year. Won 101 games and made the playoffs. Had some home games in the playoffs for the first time in a long time. They have a ripe young offense, probably the best young offense in all of baseball, with the number one prospect in all of baseball, Jackson Holiday, coming up this year to help out as well. They're so stacked in the middle infield that they had no room even to use Joey Ortiz as a utility infielder on the major league roster. They're that stacked. So these players that they gave away were just no-brainers. It's not like we got their top prospect or even one of their top 3 prospects in this deal at all. They are doing backflips. If you're an Oriole fan, everyone loves this deal. You've got Corbin Burns for 1 year on already like a championship caliber possible roster, and this was the missing piece that you're missing. To the Orioles pitching staff credit, last year they were kind of cobbled together by a bunch of like middle rotation starters, and they did a fairly good job and got that team to the playoffs, but it was mostly due to their offense. They were just missing this legitimate ace, and this is a slam dunk deal. And if you're a Baltimore Oil fan, you are absolutely jacked beyond belief for the 2024 season. Now, opposite of that, we get to you, Brewers fans, our listeners. Okay, so what did we get in return? We got 2 players. We've got Dayton Lane Hall, also goes by DL Hall. I'm assuming he goes by that because Dayton Hall sounds like a college dormitory, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, he's a left-handed pitcher. He's 25 years old. He was a former #1 pick, 21st overall, I believe, in the 2017 draft. That's the draft where the Brewers picked higher up and picked Keston here in that draft. We know how that worked out. So DL Hall was drafted out of high school out of Valdosta, Georgia, at that year. So we'll get more into him. The other player coming back is shortstop Joey Ortiz, right-handed batter. He's also 25 years old. He was a former 4th-round pick, I think, in 2018. He's also made his way through the system, and has really had some nice years the last couple of years in the minor leagues. So let's start. My favorite of the 2 prospects is easily the pitcher Hall. I'll get into that in a second. I'll start though with Joey Ortiz. Let's see. So this is a guy who's got a great hit tool. He's definitely known for awesome defensively. So he's like a for sure major league caliber defensive shortstop. And so I think you could also argue Bryce Trang is as well. So between the 2 of these guys, I think that they'll be solidifying our middle infield for years to come. Who's going to be at what position? I don't know. But if I had to guess, Ortiz would probably be our shortstop with Trang staying at second. But that's interchangeable. I think Trang is just as good defensively. Now, there's a lot of comparisons between these 2 players. Trang hits left-handed, Ortiz is a right-handed hitter, but they have a similar skill set in the fact they have well, I will say Ortiz has a better hit tool than Trang. Trang has a little bit more speed, but both of them have, I guess, less than average power. In my opinion, if you're building a Major League Baseball team, you need to have guys that at almost every position to hit 20, 25 homers plus a year, at least have that ability. The Brewers front office, Arnold and Stearns did not have that philosophy. I mean, they value defense and speed a lot more than power. I do not agree with that philosophy. I mean, that's fine. It's worked out for the Brewers. It's worked out for the Rays. In my opinion, Joey Ortiz is in some ways very similar to Luis Urias in the fact that he can play third, short, second, all pretty well. He's got a lot of versatility, but he's a right-handed batter with a nice hit tool. But in reality, he's lacking power. Like, to me, regular starting power, in my opinion.
Yeah, to be fair, Craig, he did have a season. I think I'm just looking over his stats here. In terms, just gave it to me. His high in home runs for a year in the minor leagues was 19 home runs, which was 2022 when he split the year there between AA and AAA at that point. So yeah, he has not ever eclipsed 20 home run total. 19 was his tops.
Yeah. And Luis Urias also shows some power in the minor leagues as well. And I think people thought he could be a 20-plus home run hitter regularly. And that really never came to fruition. And now he's pretty much buried as a utility infielder in the major leagues from this day forward, most likely. And who knows how long he'll hang on doing that. Luis Urias also had 19 home runs one year in 2019 in the minor leagues as well. And he actually had a better batting eye than Ortiz does. So again, I'm not going to throw out too many comps. Since we have Brewer listeners, Brewer fans as listeners, I try to use Brewer comps as best as I can, I guess. But again, all these guys are their own individual player. I think the ceiling for Joey Ortiz is someone like a JJ Hardy, who did win multiple Gold Gloves, who did have 25-ish home run power. I think Joey Ortiz could get there, but he also has the same floor, in my opinion, of a Luis Urias, where he really could just like play him out as a utility for a couple of years. So there's danger in that.
And we also do have a great utility player in Andrew Monasterio too. We should point that out. My hope is that this does not kind of block Tyler Black's path to the majors, or Taylor Black, sorry, for a variety of reasons. And number one, I just like the way that he's developed in our own system. And number two, I just want to lock down that position. I really don't want it to be another utility guy, platoon guy. Like I love versatility, but you can't have every guy in your roster being known for their versatility. Like at some point, you got to have 8 starting players at 8 different positions, and then you go from there with late inning substitutions, guys off the bench, that sort of thing. But you can't have a team of guys of just versatile guys. You got to have guys who are stable, who have power, who can hit for average. Those are the types of guys that we should be targeting. And maybe Ortiz turns into that. I'd be ecstatic personally if he turned into a JJ Hardy and we had team control of him for 6 years. Like that would be just a great return for me. I'm a little bit more worried though that that's perhaps aiming a little high, but I could be wrong. I very much hope to be wrong on Joey Ortiz.
Well, no, and again, just throwing out Brewer comps, he'll be somewhat in between any of these variations of players, and that's what his outcome could be. I think JJ Hardy is the high end. I think Bill Byers might be even a decent comp, from the right, hitting from the right side, where he's good defensively, but really he's not going to hit that much power. Good average though.
Heck of a football coach, though. Heck of a football coach.
Nice, yeah. And I think the floor is Louis Urias, but it's very similar to current Brewer Bryce Trang in a lot of ways, who I also feel is a great utility player, but not necessarily a great regular at any one position, but he is great defensively. So I think that earns himself the right to be a regular in a major league lineup, in my opinion. So
yeah,
it just goes back
I'm fine with Trang as a starter.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm fine with Bryce Trang as a starter, Craig. My problem is that you can't have 8 Bryce Trangs in your lineup. Bryce Trang is a glove first middle infielder, a guy who makes great defensive plays, routine, and love watching Bryce Trang play. That being said, I love watching Bryce Trang play well behind a pitcher, not while facing one. And we know what we're going to get with him with the bat, and hopefully he improves at some point. But I'm not banking on that. I don't look at Bryce Trang for his bat skills. I look at him as a defensive guy. But we can't have 2 of those guys up the middle. We just can't.
Oh, I know. It's funny that you mentioned it. You basically stole my thunder there, because I was going to say this is like the Rays philosophy when they went to the World Series back, when these guys were part of their front office. One of their best players was Ben Zobrist. Ben Zobrist was an awesome hitter, great strike zones judgment, had limited power, had great versatility, which again is also very valuable for an organization and a team. However, you cannot build a championship team with 9 Ben Zobrist. You have to have variety. You have to have power. This team is not doing that. If you look at all the guys, the way they're building this team, I mean, Sal Frelick has limited power, in my opinion. Hopefully he can. Same thing. When we drafted like Trent Grisham, he had limited power. Same profile for Garrett Mitchell. He's got a little more power, I think. But again, it's all these.
I think Mitchell is. They're going to bank on Mitchell, I think, to provide a lot of that power, which will be interesting to see if he can kind of make that step up. I think that the line on Mitchell was, when we drafted him in 2020, is that he led that conference. He played for USC, UCLA. He led that conference in doubles that year, and the thought was that with beefing up a little bit, that strength could translate into major league power, playing in a different stadium than I think the one that he played at in college had some of the deeper fences in college baseball. So I think Mitchell could be an interesting case. He's obviously been injured a lot, but to your point, I totally agree overall. I just wanted to interject that quick about Mitchell. It'll be interesting to see what he does this year.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I hope I'm wrong on him, but he seems like more of a doubles and triples guy with his speed. Again, they're valuing versatility, defense, and it seems like they just are getting all these leadoff type hitter types, and they're not prioritizing middle order hitters. But they did just sign Rhys Hoskins, and they did just draft Brock Wilken in the first round, who was basically the best power hitter in college baseball last year, and so that was a pleasant surprise. I do think that this was a move more for next year or possibly this year. But I think he's basically, like I said, this was replacing Willie Adames 2024 or 2025 and beyond, whenever that point happens.
Which could happen in the next couple of days here, Craig, too. I mean, you never know. Willie Adames might be on the block. If we're going to go full cost savings mode, then Willie's gone, I guess, depending on the return. But there's been a lot of talk today that the Brewers are interested in both unloading Willie Adames, and one writer is reporting, one of our colleagues who wrote it, SB Sports, I believe, wrote that the Brewers are very much looking at trading Devin Williams right now, too.
Wow. Okay. Well, here we go. I guess it's almost full rebuild time. But no, I'm totally for trading William Donis as soon as possible. And I think if that happens before during the season, that Ortiz and Terang, the combination of them will handle up the middle. Tyler Black and Monasterio would probably platoon at third until Brock Wilken is ready or whatever. And then at that point, I've actually read that Tyler Black's defense is pretty bad at second and third, that he possibly will be a future first base / DH profile, and that's fine. But as long as he can hit. So all right, well, getting back to Joey Ortiz, like I said, he's like one of those underrated guys. Like he was completely blocked in the Orioles system. He needed a way out. This was a way out. Losing him is like nothing to the Orioles, and getting him for the Brewers, if he does become a starting shortstop, it's definitely something, and it's of value. You know, getting a starting shortstop that you control for 5 or 6 years, that's a major league regular, is definitely valuable. So I'll give the Brewers that he's got the potential, but there's some downside and some warts on him, so to speak. All right, now let's go over to my favorite of the 2 players that we acquired, and that's of course DL Hall. This is a guy that was ranked as probably like the 3rd best high school starting pitcher coming out of his draft class back in 2017. From the left-hand side, he's just a great competitor. He does have an unbelievable fastball. That's his plus pitch. He also has like a plus changeup. And because his changeup is so good, it makes his fastball that tops out like a 96 or so seem like it's even faster, and it has a rising action to it. However, his thing again is with command. He's had command issues throughout the minor leagues. You know, that's why the Orioles actually used him in the bullpen last year. And they were someone that was still in need of developing starting pitching. However, he entered the year last year, spring training, thinking that they were going to give him an opportunity to start right out of the gate. But he hurt his back in spring training, and therefore was not able to build up enough innings to start the year as a started at the big league level. They sent him down to AAA Norfolk, and they built him up. But at that point, though, the Orioles were surprise contenders, and they realized they really couldn't afford to have him have growing pains at the major league level. So what they did is they deloaded him, is the term they use, and they basically ramped him down to have him come help out the major league bullpen, which he did do for a short time later in the year. And even in the playoffs in a series against the Rangers, he came in and looked lights out. So people after that speculate, oh, wow, well, this guy's going to be an awesome future reliever, especially from the left-hand side. That's super valuable. It's awesome. And that's how the Orioles will probably use him going forward. However, most people are saying this is a very similar case to back when Josh Hader was being developed as a prospect. And just so happens he was also drafted by the Baltimore Orioles originally and went through their system. There was questions about his, you know, they said he could be a lights out reliever, or he could be a Chris Sale-like starter. Like, which do you want? And after he got traded to the Brewers, they decided to go with the reliever. And as you can see, that worked out very well, not only for Josh Hader, but for the Brewers for a number of years. So is that the correct route for DL Hall? No one really knows. But what I will say is that I've read that DL Hall wants to start. And I think that he should be given every opportunity to do so, because I think that's a greater need for the Milwaukee Brewers. And so Matt Arnold actually came out and said in the press conference last night after the trade that it is the Brewers' intention to allow him to start. And I assume he'd get a handful of starts, if not a mini starts this year in the Milwaukee Brewers rotation. So that is exciting. I do think this guy's got a ceiling of a number 2 starter, but he also has a very, very low floor. So that's a little scary.
Yeah, it was interesting. And Craig, I do appreciate you going to that press conference last night with Matt Arnold. I know that it was kind of a surprise and came up suddenly with the trade, but I did hear that comment from him with your report here. I think it was interesting. They said they haven't actually talked to him yet and had that conversation, which is kind of interesting. But apparently that is a conversation that's going to be had, you know, in the coming days before the team reports to spring training. And certainly I think he's going to get a look as a starter. I think he's going to get stretched out. I remember on this show, we had that same debate about Josh Hader back in 2017, 2018, whenever that decision was kind of being made about Josh. I think we had Corey Knebel as our closer at the time, and there were some questions, and then Jeremy Jeffers after that. And so there were some questions about whether or not Josh Hader would really be needed at that in that position out of the bullpen, and how he might be more valuable as a starter. So it's kind of funny. It's sort of deja vu all over again, so to speak, on some of our conversations now. And what his future role might be with the Brewers. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens with Devin Williams. Devin's a free agent after next season. So we've got, some decisions to make with him. We've also got other hard throwers in the bullpen right now with Abner Uribe. So maybe adding another power arm to the bullpen might be exactly what we need. But it'll be real interesting to see how the Brewers handle DL Hall and his 6 years of team control.
Yeah, absolutely. And now the difference
until we trade him while in first place, at the deadline, and in 6 years or 5 years.
Yeah, there's that.
But
I again, from my understanding of it, and again, I don't have a source on this besides TC Tom Carter, our anonymous source.
Yeah. Oh, our anonymous source, Tom Carter. Yeah.
Yeah, he says that when these trade negotiations started between Arnold and the Orioles said that one of the reasons they're willing to move him is because he has stated to their organization that he would prefer to remain a starter, and that they didn't want to insert him into a playoff team's number 5 starting spot going forward because of the growing, whatever. And so that made them more willing to deal him because they did value his arm and thought he'd be awesome weapon for them out of the bullpen. But because that was a wish of his, that they were more willing to part with him in a trade, especially if bringing someone back like Corbin Burnes. So the fact that the Brewers, they felt the Brewers also still viewed him as a starter, and that's the reason that they were able to give up Corbin Burnes with him as a headliner. Because if you really think about it, it doesn't make no sense the Brewers would want to get rid of Corbin Burnes, even 1 year of Corbin Burnes, for a bullpen lefty and a utility infield / shortstop. I mean, that's just not enough of a return.
Unless that lefty out of the bullpen was on the level of Josh Hader. I mean, that is the comp that you could throw out there. Then that might be worth it, because I would certainly take 6 years of Josh Hader as a closer coming out of the bullpen than 1 year of Corbin Burnes as a starter. That I personally would.
But I mean, that's like the gold standard. I mean, every lefty that's
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to imply that we're getting Josh Hader 2.0 necessarily. What I am saying is that there are examples that you could make of guys that a left-hand reliever could be as valuable as a starter like Corbin Burnes. I'm not saying that that's the case.
Absolutely. I think all Brewer fans would agree that the Brewers did make the right decision on Josh Hader, and that most likely if he was a starter, he probably would only go 5 or 6 innings at a time, which I think that the Brewers still would value because of their deepness of their bullpen, and that they can get 5 or 6 lights out hitting from a starter like a Chris Sale, that they would definitely have left him in that role. But I think they made the right decision, and Brewer fans obviously wouldn't argue that. And I think, but with this being said, I really think that it's it would behoove the Brewers to leave DL Hall as a starter as long as possible until he shows them that he can't do it, and then make him a bullpen weapon. So.
Well, part of the issue right now, Craig, is we may not have as much of a choice as you might think. I mean, this rotation is pretty thin, and I don't know if we're going to have time to get to it on this episode, but we will still do another season preview episode for sure, and probably another spring training preview episode actually before camps open up. But the Brewers' starting pitching depth as it stands is not good. I mean, we have now we obviously lost Brandon Woodruff. He's a free agent still, so there's a chance he could come back, but he's injured until August, best case scenario. We've lost Corbin Burnes now with this trade. We've lost Adrian Hauser. So the Brewers rotation has taken some major hits since the end of the 2023 season. So we may very much need DL Hall in the starting rotation as probably our 3rd or 4th starter actually at this point. I think obviously, unless there's some drastic changes again in the next 10 or so days before camp opens up, I think that Freddie Peralta goes into the year as your ace, your opening day starter. Wade Miley's probably your number 2. And then you could make an argument for DL Hall. You could make an argument for Robert Gasser. You could make an argument for, I guess, a number of guys Joe Ross maybe to be in the rotation. I'm not sure. There's some other younger arms that we could look at, but these are conversations that the Brewers, it's kind of a luxury to have. I think that we may need to throw DL Hall into the starting rotation.
Well, no, I think that's the plan. But I think you'd have to win a spot in spring training, but I don't think his competition is very stellar. No offense to Joe Ross or Colin Ray, but I think he's definitely going to get innings this year at the start of the major league level. And like I said, he's already 25. He's ready. It's been 7 years since they drafted him out of high school. He's more than ready now. With that being said, because of his injury last year and his bullpen usage, he cannot throw 150 innings this year by any means. And that's one thing that we're really losing out in the value of losing Burnes. And when you have a starter throw upwards of 180 to 200 innings. That's so valuable to a overall rotation because it just takes out pressure of everyone else in the rotation and especially your bullpen on the days that your horse goes, so to speak. And when you lose that horse, it is a ripple effect throughout the rest of the rotation where other guys have to pick up slack, and it really taxes your bullpen over the course of the long season. And so the Brewers are going to feel the repercussions of not having Corbin Burnes in that rotation, and not having Brandon Woodruff for that matter. The two of those horses being gone, it's going to be a challenging year. And I think the disappointing thing is there's just no way the Brewers are favorites to win the NL Central anymore. And I felt that we still were last week. And as a Brewer fan, this just breaks my heart that this is where we're at. So, but it should still be an exciting season. We have a young core of great hitters. I don't dislike the two players we have coming back. I especially, like I said, like Hall quite a bit. But again, it's one of those things where I felt like we should have got more for the caliber player that we gave away, franchise type player. But it is what it is. So we'll move forward from here. And again, that's how I wanted to end the podcast. Like, where do the Brewers go from here? And again, spring training's coming up very, very shortly here, which is exciting. However, I really feel that they should move Willie Adames as soon as possible. I think that they should wait on Devin Williams unless they get blown away. There's no rush in trading him, especially if they want to succeed in 2024 in any fashion whatsoever. Because I still feel, even though they're not favorites to win the division, that if they can trade Adames and maybe sign a guy or two, that we could definitely still contend for a wild card spot this year, and without question. And we should do that. But really, I think it's time to get something for Willie Adames. And I'm sure that there's some suitors, either the Dodgers, the Angels, or the Marlins, all are in need of a starting shortstop.
Giants.
And the Giants as well. Yeah. So
I just want to jump in here really quick, Craig, and say, first, I'm not going to give up on winning the division. I think this is still a very solid team. I think there's just a lot more wild cards today than there were yesterday. I agree with you. I don't dislike the guys that we got back. There's more wild cards because you've lost your ace, but you've also gained some talent back. And there's a lot of young guys on this team, and we don't know how Jackson Chourio is going to do, for instance. There's just more wild cards than there were when you've got a 1-2-3 punch at the top of your rotation with Peralta, Burnes, and Woodruff. So I don't think that we're necessarily less talented this year. I think that we just have less or bets, if that makes sense. So that I guess is my final kind of wrap up comment on everything going into the spring training mode here. Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly. And this division is pretty weak. That the division is pretty weak too. I mean, I still don't think that the Cubs have gotten better. It'll be interesting to see if they are able to re-sign Bellinger or not. But as of right now, I think they've gotten significantly worse, to be honest, with losing Bellinger and Marcus Stroman. I don't think that the Cardinals have gotten a ton better. I think they've gotten a little bit better with Sonny Gray and patching up some other holes in the rotation. But I don't think that they're untouchable by any stretch of the imagination. The Reds.
Well, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would probably put my money on the Cincinnati Reds to be the favorites to win the division right now. But I think the Brewers are right there with the Cubs, Cardinals, and us ahead of the Pirates still, and in that pack. And so, I do agree with you that the Cardinals and Cubs have not really vastly improved themselves this offseason. So the Brewers can still survive this, but they're gonna need some innings from some quality pitchers, and maybe they still just need to sign someone, if not one or two veteran starters to fill some of those innings, or either.
And the Reds haven't proven themselves either yet, by the way. I mean, they weren't able to lock down much of anything. They've got a lot of talent, but it's a young team. It's sort of like Milwaukee in many ways. I think that Ellie De La Cruz is, an interesting talent. I think Jackson Chourio is just as interesting. So I'm excited to see those two teams kind of match up here for the next 5, 6, 7 years with some of those talented younger players going head to head multiple times per year as a division rival. So it's pretty exciting, actually.
It is. I think it's going to be a very interesting division for a long time. And even, I know I keep putting the Pirates in the basement, but they're actually can be a surprise team in the next couple of years as well. So it'll be an interesting dogfight in NL Central for at least the next 5+ years, without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely. So, no, good show here today, Craig. Just wanted to thank our listeners and everybody who's supported our show and kind of opined on some of our social media stuff. Just as a reminder, give us a follow, Brew Crew Review 1 on Twitter. You can send all your questions to Scott at Brew Crew Review Podcasts with an S
at gmail.com. I'm sure we'll get to them on one of our future episodes. And yeah, just when you think that the off season is kind of winding down and nothing exciting is happening, all of a sudden we go ahead and trade our 8th pitcher, for a couple prospects.
Yeah, and maybe there's more trades in store. Well, we never know at this point. So, but there's a lot of excitement still. As a Milwaukee Brewer fan, there's a lot of young guys to root for, and like I said, I think the Brewers have kind of retooled. This is not a rebuild by any means, but it's a retooling, and they're leaning toward the youth, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it'll, in the long run, pay dividends. And like I said, hopefully in the long run, this Corbin Burns trade looks better than it does today, because it definitely stings. So. We'll get through this together, Brewer fans. We always have, and that includes you, Scott Bartell. So just hang in there, buddy. And all our Brewer fans, we'll get through this, and the Brewers will one day see the promised land, so to speak. But all right, well, thanks again, Vince, for joining us, and remember to stay classy, Wisconsin, and go Brewers.
Stay classy, Craig. Stay classy, Scotty and Chad and Big Room. Go Brewers. Do, 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 do.